I'm Dr. Jeff Block, and this is Nurturing Nature with Doc Block. This short little video is going to be about growing anthuriums like a pro, but you don't have to be a pro to grow it. This is going to be mostly for people who are novices or intermediate in what you think you know about how to grow plants, and I think it's going to be helpful for you succeeding with the velvet-leafed anthuriums. Gardening is among the world's most favorite hobbies, with 55% of American households accounting for 185 million active gardeners. There's a human need to nurture the nature not only of people, but also plants. As our ancestors evolved in prehistoric times, early human beings likely recognized that a profound relationship exists between plants and health. Ancient healers were among the earliest of civilization's most accomplished botanists and would have been regarded poorly if they failed to keep their plants alive. In the plant kingdom, aroids include over 100 genera, one of which is the Anthurium genus that I regard as being among the most regal of aroids. The Anthurium hybrids I've curated originated in South America's tropical jungles. Anthuriums make wonderfully exotic indoor plants. They boast leathery leaves that are heart-shaped and display dynamic, reflective, velvety sheen colors, often with contrasting leaf veins that can mesmerize us. Hobbies, with 55% of American households accounting for 185 million active gardeners. There's a human need to nurture. I've grown ornamental plants in South Florida for over 50 years and dedicated much of my breeder's passion concerning rare velvet-leafed anthuriums, in large part because I found them to be not only magnificently exotic plants, but also an excellent choice among indoor plants. As our ancestors evolved in prehistoric times, early human beings likely recognized that a profound relationship exists between plants and health. Ancient healers were among the earliest of civilization's most accomplished botanists and would have been regarded poorly if they failed to keep their plants alive. In the plant kingdom, aroids include over 100 genera, one of which is the Anthurium genus that I regard as being among the most regal of aroids. The Anthurium hybrids I've curated originated in South America's tropical jungles. Anthuriums make wonderfully exotic indoor plants. They boast leathery leaves that are heart-shaped and display dynamic, reflective, velvety sheen colors, often with contrasting leaf veins that can mesmerize us. I've grown ornamental plants in South Florida for over 50 years and dedicated much of my breeder's passion concerning rare velvet-leafed anthuriums, in large part because I found them to be not only magnificently exotic plants, but also an excellent choice among indoor plants. Velvet-leafed anthuriums are considered epiphytes. That means they prefer to grow up and onto supporting trees and larger plants. Because they've evolved to grow up into the trees, air circulation needs to be optimal. Excellent ventilation is essential for good anthurium health. Although they can tolerate ranges of humidity and air temperatures, these plants are tropical and prefer humidity levels between 60 and 90%, and temperatures also, coincidentally, between 60 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 16 to 30 degrees Celsius. Warmer temperatures generally require higher corresponding humidity levels to counteract the evaporative water losses at those increased air temperatures. Conversely, cooler temperatures will cause more leaf damage if your Anthurium's root systems are not adequately hydrated. Because they've evolved in the lowest shaded levels of tree canopies, Anthuriums require protection from direct sunlight and can acclimate to the lower light levels seen in indoor settings near windows. Generally, full-spectrum indirect light is well tolerated. Because velvet-leafed Anthuriums naturally come from near the equator, providing 12 hours of light throughout the year makes evolutionary sense. The Anthurium flower resembles a candle and is somewhat unique in that it goes through 2 successive sexual growth stages. The Anthurium flower initiates reproductive function by first showing its receptive female stage, during which time it can be successfully pollinated. After this stage concludes, the same flower then transitions to its male, and this is a pollen donor stage, and it begins to produce pollen over the next several days. The timing of receptivity does not allow a given flower's pollen to be used on itself because its receptive stage will have already ended. However, if that flower, when receptive pollen is received from another flower source, it will conceive to produce berries with seeds. If a flower fails to be successfully pollinated, it will wither away, but soon be replaced by a new leaf associated with a new flower. The transfer of pollen from the male stage of an Anthurium flower is usually done by insects and even small lizards, but you can collect and transfer pollen using tiny paintbrushes. However, I found that little makeup applicators work better. However, what works best for me is when I use my fingers and do the deed. I'll check that I can see a little bit of powder on my dry, clean fingers, and then when I have a female flower's receptive dewdrops, known as stigmatic fluid, I'll simply rub the pollen into it. And yes, freshness matters. As with people, timing is essential for conception. Of course, the female flower's receptive lubrication helps the pollen stick on contact or the penetration point. So new life in Anthuriums can be thought of as depending on timing, lubrication, and penetration. Go figure. If no girls are ready when a boy flower has his fresh pollen available, it can be collected, kept dry, and immediately stored in a freezer. I collect this pollen on makeup applicator brushes and use a funnel underneath to catch microscopic pollen grains in a small Ziploc bag along with a small antidesiccant pack to minimize the humidity around the pollen and lengthen its shelf life for up to a few weeks. After several weeks to a few months, small bumps appear on the conceived flower that go on to develop berries that contain 1 or sometimes 2 seeds in each fruit. Ripe whole berries usually present themselves rather suddenly. While an intact whole berry can be planted, I found that fruit sugars inside the pulp break down through the oxidation and fermentation and then can progress into molds that often impact the seed inside. Over the past 40 years, I've sown well over 100,000 seeds and developed an efficient method for separating these fresh seeds from their berries. I can start by placing them in a stainless steel strainer and gently rub them into the wire mesh to remove the berry skin and then wash away the pulp with clean water, revealing the seeds inside. The seeds inside, after a few rinse and repeat cycles, result in some very small but cream-colored fresh seeds that are very easy to sow. The cleaned Anthurium seeds have a translucent surface membrane wrapped around it. Even before germination occurs, their color changes from cream to green. This is revealing active doubling of growth of cells inside called chloroplasts, capable of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the remarkable way that plants convert sunlight into their fuel energy, allowing it to grow. When I sow the seeds, I don't bury them. I have a much better success with germination when I place seeds on top of soil and keep them moist and warm. Surface sowing allows full spectrum light to penetrate the seed's chloroplasts, and this method reliably helps most of my seeds germinate. For germination, and all flowering plant seeds do it, somehow nature has evolved a miraculous event where the first taproot grows down, seeking water, and the first leaf goes up, seeking light. We might not know every fine little detail leading to germination, but we're glad it happens, because without it, the world's evolution, natural selection of plants, there would be no life on Earth as we know it. On close exam, the very first few roots show tiny little hair-like structures that are in a very real sense feeling their environment for the first time. Whether sensing moisture or responding to other components of their surroundings, including electromagnetic influences, microscopic sensory structures attest to the Anthurium root's sophisticated mechanism of survival, evidenced since the earliest stages of growth. The very first leaf's presentation is a momentous event to witness, much as the same way as a human birth is a wondrous event. When we access something notably beautiful and rare, it's noble to custodially care for that special product of nature, and that's not only when things are going well. In sickness and in health, this portion of the traditional marriage vows is a promise to stay faithful and committed no matter what happens. Plant health care involves not only grooming healthy plants, but also requires a keen observer to spot the earliest indicators of plant sickness. Of course, optimal growing conditions surely minimize pests and diseases, but problems with pests and diseases do happen, and the earliest possible detection and treatment leads to the best plant patient outcome. Before specific treatments such as applying chemicals is considered, the growing conditions that led to that pest or disease should be recognized and corrected. Overcrowding, less or more light, humidity, ventilation, or warmth should be considered and optimally corrected whenever possible. Although adequate humidity is essential for growing healthy epiphytes, if the humidity is too high and plants' leaves and media are not allowed to dry out periodically, then diseases caused by bacterium, including the endemic Xanthomonas axonopodus, may be evidenced as yellow, orange, or water spots, and many different plants' leaves, including on velvet-leafed Anthuriums, can be affected. Mitigating treatments to minimize the infections from spreading not only includes pruning leaves, lowering humidity, and improving air circulation, but also is helped by quarantining plants and/or spray applications of Phyton 27, rotated with mycobutanil, or azoxystrobin. Humidity levels that remain too low, particularly indoors, can lead to infestations with mites, and overcrowding increases this pest's unsightly impact. Unfortunately, recommended horticultural oil sprays or wiping off leaf surfaces with alcohol are renowned for damaging tender leaf surfaces. Integrated pest management may seem high-tech and ecologically sound, but before investing in predatory mites, simply try washing the impacted Anthurium thoroughly with water and increasing the humidity levels. Do this and your problems with mites may suddenly disappear. Thrips parvus spinus originated in Indonesia, but the global plant trade has recently found them in the USA, particularly in subtropical environments growing tropical ornamentals, including Anthuriums. They're among the very smallest of thrips and can easily be missed with the naked eye. Thrips hide in the surface media and emerge preferring to feed on tender leaf tissues more than roots. Damage seen on tender new emerging leaf surfaces typically appears as deformed, desiccated leaves. Crowding of susceptible plants allows these insects to remain undetected until their leaf damage is evidenced. The recommended chemical spray treatment for thrips is with imidacloprid 2F. Because they have a 10 to 12-day life cycle, thrips can be a challenge to control even with repeated spray applications. In summary then, good horticultural practices keep most pests and diseases from becoming significant problems. The medical saying of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure is not only sound doctrine, it's also good doctoring. Potted plants do not offer an unrestricted space to grow. Their roots grow into the confines of a decidedly unnatural pot, and when the roots have nowhere else to go, they'll eventually, in a sense, choke off the plant and the plant will start to decline. When it's time for a move, a larger pot will usually produce a larger plant. It's best to start with an actively growing, well-rooted plant that will quickly extend its roots into a new larger pot's fresh media. The choice of media generally correlates with how much ambient water and humidity is present. The media I use in humid South Florida is a 3-part mix consisting of coconut coir, coarse perlite, and pine bark. Although anthuriums need excellent drainage and aeration of their roots, drier indoor conditions may benefit from media that holds a little more water, while in wet humid settings such as Florida, media that's more easily dries out is preferred. The method I prefer is to remove the plant to be repotted and to dust its roots off with hormonidin before placing it into a larger pot. The new roots provide extra space, and they should gently be filled using a similar media to what the smaller plant was already growing in. I'll then add a surface application of a little long-acting, slow-release balanced fertilizer, such as Dynamite or Nutricoat, that are chemically released. However, in the summertime, I actually prefer to use Osmocote because it's released only when temperatures exceed 80 degrees or 26 centigrade. I'll generously water in anthuriums and place them back to where they came from. Ideally, the timing of potting up plants should occur at the beginning of growing seasons to minimize root shock and failure to thrive. Making baby anthuriums by pollinating a female flower with a different parent male flower's pollen can be a rewarding experience for gardeners. It relies on knowing some things about the genetics that determine why a hybrid might or might not look like its parent plant. This is known as Mendelian genetics, named after Gregor Mendel, the monk who experimented with peas that you may recall from high school class. Your siblings, brothers and sisters, are not genetic equals of either of their parents, are they? They're mixes of both. Because some traits may be dominant and others recessive, some genetic variation of what the offspring looks like is to be expected. When I have have a breeder's vision regarding which offspring might result from marrying two similar or dissimilar parents, I'll search through the resulting seedlings and select for vigor and whatever desired traits were sought as a significant moment. Although this endeavor is a time and space-consuming experience, when a new creation that may have never before been seen is ultimately revealed, it can be a gratifying moment that in the breeder's vision has finally been realized. Making identical babies to any parent Anthurium is possible with time and careful propagation from cuttings. It can be tedious and typically yields between 1 to 4 offshoots that are the exact same genetics as their single parent plant. So twins, triplets, or even quads are indeed possible to develop from direct cuttings. When more Anthuriums are sought, plants can be produced by individual cells in a controlled laboratory setting. The process is called tissue culture and has been used for larger scale production to make orchids over the past greater than 30 years. Some advanced work on Anthuriums has progressed through other ornamental plants and tissue culture for large-scale manufacturing to feed the world. And feeding the world really does rely on the modern lab sciences to supply the world's increasing demand for food, particularly in agriculturally challenged, underdeveloped countries. Medical science and agricultural science share many of the same basic health and wellness tenets. Although many of us started working with plants as collectors, it's far more important to first learn how to sustain plants than to simply regard them as expendable because there are more available to collect. Eventually, the collector will also run out of space, so sustaining special selections is the ultimate goal when a collector responsibly evolves to become one of nature's noble custodians. Plant health and wellness follows much of the same common sense wisdom that human health and wellness relies on. We've touched on the consequences of diseases and pests by emphasizing the importance of careful horticultural observations and the early detection of problems. Indeed, we learn more from our failures than our successes, so don't dismay if a plant is lost. But do be dismayed if you don't know why an Anthurium didn't thrive or may have died. Read books, study online resources, and perhaps most important, find mentors who help guide you as they've helped guide me to what I learned to speak about today. The healing arts will ultimately prevail, in that without horticultural knowledge and the ability to sustain plant-derived remedies, many of the world's healers would have lost their medicinal plant formulary and most certainly would have failed at their craft, not only as a healer, but also as a farmer. Along with my wife, Michelle, we've raised our sons to become healthy young men, and this is life's reward for parents. Nurturing a plant's nature to grow seeds into specimens can be an equally gratifying experience, so please have fun playing with plants, make new friends, while comparing notes to succeed with sustaining the wonderfully regal velvet-leafed Anthuriums.